Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Love, Lucia, The Letters of Lucia Berlin and Kenward Elmslie. Edited by Chip Livingston. Narrated by Jim Seybert and Kim Niemi. Introduction. In 1994, internationally acclaimed fiction writer Lucia Berlin met New York School poet librettist Kenward Elmslie at Naropa University's summer writing program, where they were both visiting writers. "We just clicked," Lucia said in a 2002 interview. "It was as if we'd known each other forever, and just talked and talked under a tree, like we'd been sitting on a stoop for ages." Lucia called it an instant friendship. "We cut through right away into each other's deep feelings. It was like falling in love, or going back to your childhood best friend in first grade. That kind of really pure friendship." Lucia Berlin, 1936 to 2004, was born in Alaska, but moved frequently throughout her childhood and spent most of her youth in Santiago, Chile. As an adult, she lived in New Mexico, New York City, Mexico, California, and Colorado. Her short stories began to appear in literary magazines in the 1960s, and in collections, from Angel's Laundromat, Turtle Island, 1981, to Where I Live Now, Black Sparrow Press, 1999. During her lifetime, Lucia had a relatively small but devoted following. In 2015, a posthumous collection of her stories, A Manual for Cleaning Women, Farrar, Straus and Giroux, debuted on the New York Times bestseller list its first week and was named a Best Book of the Year by many international critics. In 2018, Evening in Paradise, a second collection of her stories, and Welcome Home, a memoir with letters, were also published by Farrar, Straus and Giroux to wide acclaim in the United States and abroad. Kenward Elmslie was born in 1929 in New York City, but spent his youth in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and at the St. Mark's boarding school in Southborough, Massachusetts. After graduating from Harvard in 1950, this grandson of Joseph Pulitzer began his professional career writing librettos and lyrics for operas and Broadway musicals starting in the 1960s. Miss Julie, Lizzie Borden, The Sweet By and By. The same decade, his first three poetry collections were published: Pavilions, The Champ, Album. These were followed by 25 additional books of poems, some of which were collaborations with visual artists, and a novel, The Orchid Stories, Doubleday, 1973. Kenward would write the lyrics for at least 7 more musicals and operas, including The Grass Harp and Seagull, which are still widely produced. He wrote the lyrics for Lovewise, a song recorded by Nat King Cole and others. In 1973, Kenward founded Z Magazine and Z Press, which published many of the poets and writers now associated with the New York School. Lucia and Kenward's correspondence began in 1994, when she was living in Boulder, Colorado, and he was dividing his time between New York City and Calais, Vermont. It quickly grew to a literary exchange of about 2 letters per week for a decade. Despite the geographical distance between them, and having only been in person together a total of 5 or 6 times, Lucia and Kenward depended on their intimate friendship and deeply valued their faithful correspondence. "We're able to write letters where we feel that we are ourselves with each other," Lucia said. "When he writes about Calais, he writes all the details of the town, the mailman and the grocer. I wrote a long letter about how upset I was when my mailman dyed his mustache. Things like that. We love to tell each other." They also loved to gossip, to write bad things about good friends, as Lucia described it, admitting, "We can also be really catty." But mostly, Kenward and Lucia wrote with great affection for those writers and artists closest in their memories and their current daily rounds: Joe Brainerd, Ed and Jenny Dorn, Ron and Pat Paget, Bobby Louise Hawkins, Ivan Savanjev, John Latouche, and others. Lucia and Kenward led theatrical lives of glamour, drama, travel, love, loss, and literature. And because they began writing as new friends, they contextualized their pasts with vivid details. Lucia told Kenward of her childhood in Chile, her homes and moves around the world, how her beauty opened doors for her and helped her get out of difficult situations. Kenward wrote of his privileged childhood as the grandson of Joseph Pulitzer, his own family's angsts and maneuverings. The two responded to national events such as the September 11th attacks, weapons of mass destruction, and President Clinton's impeachment trial. Lucia recounted watching the Kennedy inauguration during an editors' meeting at the Harvard Club. They reviewed the new books they were reading, as well as performances and shows by friends, a mix of international artists, opera singers, movie and stage actors, composers and producers, friends and writers such as Gore Vidal, John Ashbery, George Plimpton, Anne Waldman, James Schuyler, Paul Auster, Frank O'Hara, Grace Paley, Tony Kushner, Ismail Reed, Robert Creeley, Denise Levertov, Elaine Stritch, Leonard Bernstein, Felicia Montalegre, Sandy Duncan, Stella Adler, Stephen Sondheim, Brenda Lewis, Ned Rorem, John Cameron Mitchell, and Truman Capote. Their same thoughtful attention was given to the favorite authors they returned to each summer: Chekhov, Proust, Barbara Pym, Trollope, Henry Green. As attentive as they were to their beloveds and to each other, they responded to reactions and reviews of their own publications and performances. Kenward described the writing, rewriting, rehearsing, and producing involved in staging musicals and operas, his post-Standing O fatigue and depression, as well as his many collaborations with other poets and artists. He recounted conversations overheard as unhappy theater-goers left one of his productions. Who could have written a thing like that? Well, somebody must have. Lucia lamented losing new friends after they disapproved of her stories. She wrote of a poorly attended reading where she decided to read from her worst stories, and audience members shouted out their least favorites. "No, Lucia, the Texan Christmas was worse. Read Rainy Day, I can't stand that one." Kenward and Lucia told each other of their current writing projects and the dread of not writing. They wrote of their former loves and lovers, Kenward remembering his 30 years with artist-writer Joe Brainerd and Joe's death from AIDS in 1994. Kenward also told Lucia of his life with author-lyricist John Latouche during Hollywood's Red Scare, of their being escorted out of movie production houses because of Latouche's name being on McCarthy's blacklist. Lucia wrote of leaving her jazz musician husband Race Newton in New York and eloping to Mexico with musician Buddy Berlin, as well as how her actions and publications ended some friendships. She spoke of her mentor, the poet Ed Dorn, his illness and death, and they both shared griefs as other friends succumbed to age and mortality. Lucia and Kenward wrote of their own physical aging, their health and other problems, their loneliness, Lucia recounting her ailments with delicate humor, including a surprising trip to a wheelchair repair shop. They shared their joy and dependence on each other's letters. "I don't actually say it when I see your handwriting, but when there is a letter from you, I feel Kenward loves me and am cheered up before I even open it," Lucia wrote in November 2000. They're also aware of the literary value of the exchange. Kenward wrote, "Your last big letter meant the world to me. Had the same voice as your stories. There you are, much to my surprise, side by side with Chekhov. Anton, meet Lucia. Lucia, meet Anton." Lucia wrote, "Your letters remind me of Flaubert's. They are where your prose, which is poetry, shines and takes off. They would be enjoyable if only because of the exquisite New York and callous daily life chronicles. But you have written so much about opera and musicals, other lyricists and poets and painters." I met Lucia Berlin in 1996 at the University of Colorado, where I was her student in the master's program in fiction. The first time I visited her home, she introduced me to Kenward's writings, first via his postcards and recent letters attached to her refrigerator, dramatically reading aloud from those Kenward sent under various pseudonyms he imagined. Then Lucia sent me home with Kenward's recent books, Bare Bones and Routine Disruptions. Their friendship and correspondence inspired her, and she often read excerpts from his letters to her writing classes. In 2002, 4 years after I graduated from CU and during a period when Lucia and I had deepened our friendship, she proposed that I become Kenward's live-in assistant, and in January 2003 I moved to New York City and into Kenward's West Village townhouse, where I lived and worked as his helper for 9 years. During the remaining 2 years of Lucia's life, I often delivered her letters from the mail slot to Kenward at his desk or dining room table, and I frequently Xeroxed copies for him and mailed Kenward's letters to Lucia from the post offices in New York and Vermont. I counseled Lucia by email or phone if a week went by and she hadn't received a letter from him. Was Kenward okay? Was he mad at her? They both relied on receiving written news from the other. Lucia often spoke to me and also wrote to Kenward about the descriptions of his theatrical works. Kenward, these performance letters or pre- and post-performance letters are wonderful and should be published as a something of their own. They are beautifully written, very visual and filled with the excitement of the performance, so they are in a genre not literary. You're describing what's going to be live and on stage, but more than that is the undercurrent of stage thrill. Lovely. As would be expected with the hundreds and hundreds of letters they exchanged, the volume of their written dialogue is enormous, and many of the earliest letters were lost. As Lucia described in 2004, I started to tackle the Elmslie letters. Huge task. There are big envelopes, boxes, files, bags, folders bulging with letters. Many so far have no legible post office date nor date written by you inside. How could I have such a massive mess? I see how it happened. For weeks and months I would file the letters as they came in until the folder in my filing cabinet was simply too full. They would be moved to giant envelopes, then into a box. Finally, that box would be filled with envelopes. Bags would be filled with more envelopes. Some giant envelopes would end up in early boxes, others in later boxes. More confusion would occur when letters were taken out than replaced in envelopes and boxes without any sort of label. Only way to make sense of things would be to read these letters, but there are so many it might take months and months. It would take days just to count the letters so as even to make an estimate. Right now I have a new folder in my filing cabinet labeled Elmslie and containing only one letter. Anticipating the next one, your loving pal, Lucia. In my own compilation of these letters, as located and provided by Ron and Pat Paget and Jeff Berlin, as well as from Kenward's and Lucia's literary archives, I had more than 1,000 pages to sequence and then select from for this volume. I tried to choose letters most representative of Kenward's and Lucia's long friendship and their lives at the time. There are some gaps in this selection, due mainly to space restrictions, though 2 periods of time passed in 2003 and 2004 in which Kenward was out of touch with Lucia for a few months. For those periods I have provided bridging information. I lived in Kenward's home during those times, when I would assure Lucia that Kenward wasn't upset with her, explaining, "He's still in Australia," or "He's in rehearsals at the theater 15 hours a day." I hope listeners forgive any errors or lapses in judgment which are solely mine. I've done my best to honor Lucia's long-time desire that Kenward's letters, if not her and Kenward's combined correspondence, that would be 2,000 pages, she wrote, should be published. I've done my best to respect their relationship, as well as their friendships with the many public and private figures they came in notable contact with. Some omissions were necessary, given the length of some of the letters. One letter from Kenward was 24 pages. Lucia said it should be published as a chapbook itself. More seldom was an omission to ensure the privacy of non-public individuals. Love, Lucia reveals two great American writers writing to each other, but also writing for the other, hoping to cheer and delight their very important pen pal. These letters now become a correspondence for the public, offering dual epistolary memoirs and the author's intimate perspectives on international literature, opera and theater, a sustained conversation of literary history and literary gossip, as well as their own lives, in their own funny and carefully chosen words. Part 1. 1994 to 2000. Letters from Maxwell Avenue, Boulder, Colorado. Letters from Calais, Vermont, and New York, New York.
In their earliest letters, Lucia and Kenward are still getting to know each other, filling in the details of their lives, introducing the other to friends, familiar surroundings, and families. Lucia remembers her ex-husband, musician Buddy Berlin, and writes of visiting her sons in California. Kenward writes of his mother, Constance Pulitzer, and of his sisters. Kenward gives updates of ongoing productions and rewrites of his newest musical, Postcards on Parade, with composer Stephen Taylor. Lucia sends new short stories as she's finishing her collection, Where I Live Now, for Black Sparrow Press in 1999. Kenward shares plans and preparations for a collection of selected poems and lyrics, which became Routine Disruptions, published by Coffee House Press in 1998. They write of the books they're reading and rereading, of Lucia's classes at the University of Colorado, where I was her student in the graduate fiction program. They recount recent visits with good friends, writer/artists Ed and Jenny Dorn, Ron and Pat Paget, Ivan Suvaniev, Bobby Louise Hawkins, and a young helper/companion of Kenward's they refer to as CW. Boulder, Colorado, December 1994. Dear Kenward, when I realized that it was actually you singing, I was so moved that I truly didn't know what to say. I hope I said thank you. When I met you, I told you how many, many people had raved to me about your work. I don't know what I had expected. The adjectives had all been brilliant, witty, poetic, magic, hilarious, beautiful, unlike anything else. Postcards was all that. I had been unprepared for the exquisite tenderness in your work. This is so rare and so difficult to show deep feelings of love with lightness. I always avoid deep feelings, usually with a joke, so I envy your skill and courage. Damn, I really meant to say I hope this holiday isn't difficult and that you are with friends. I hope, too, that next year brings you joy. Dear man, I don't know you, but I care for you very, very much. Love, Lucia.
Calais, Vermont, late September 1995. Dear Lucia, happy autumn solstice and end of summer. Thanks so much for your hello. My quiet isolation in Vermont is so rarely impinged on by anything more violent than the reverberating whine of a saw cutting wood. I was horrified by Ivan Savanjev's Slork mugging. I've talked to him. He lost control, sobbed, and pulled himself together. 2 years ago, though it seems farther back, I made a collage book for Joe Brainerd for his first trip to hospital in Burlington, Vermont. So I made a collage book for Ivan. When someone you care about gets hurt, make something pretty to look at. Except Ivan, I guess, is in pain. Lung that leaks, so it's a strain to deal with a book of visuals, when he has a film to edit the footage of. I sent him some Z-Press moolah for new censorship technically, but of course to ease him past this rough patch. The poets on the Z-Press board said okay, bless them. It's a non-profit org that no longer publishes, so it rides to the rescue occasionally, courtesy its savvy and mysterious poet board. If you go to see him, please, pretty please ask to see the book I made for him, okay? A hurry job, so it's not refined, but it does show off my new visual stuff. That's been my summer discovery, that I can branch beyond postcard-sized collages into works to hang on the wall. I made them for my St. Johnsbury, Vermont Athenaeum performance, to be paraded down the aisle like religious icons. Bill Corbett's daughter, Marnie, did the parading. I vowed to get a standing O, rehearsed like a fiend, added pantomime, did the dialogue scenes more fully. My previous outing last spring, Michigan U. Ypsilanti, was one of those recurring academe disasters that scare the shit out of me. The money's great. The kids sit on their hands, robotic and brain-dead. Fortunately, I am not on any college academic gig list and, sob, have no future gigs at all. Must bestir myself. Phone strangers. But I'm hopeless at self-promo. Vermonters' ears are great. Regular people. Loved postcards on parade, didn't obfuscate with literary smog. It's a show. An entertainment. Period. They wrote wonderful things on cards, like a sneak preview film, which the sponsor sent me a copy of. Positive feedback. Ah. I seem to be in a reconnecting mode. Last weekend, I restored contact with big sis Viv Elmslie after a 1-year hiatus. She's single, shares my taste for irony, 71 years of age, in fine physical shape. Still a nice Vassar girl in many ways. All went well, helped by showing emotion more honestly and directly than ever before. So, this coming weekend, Cynthia Elmslie Weir, my big sis, is arriving from Cambridge. Viv went to see Joe's boulder in a field uphill where his ashes were strewn. So now Cynthia wants to do the same. She has a brace, a bad hip, a yappy dog, and quite jagged personality lunges and mood shifts, exhausting to respond to. She's 81, going on 82. I guess she's entitled, right? Fingers crossed. I dreaded let-down post-standing O, but so far it hasn't attacked me. Yesterday, Carol Armitage phoned from Firenze. She's, I hope, my new collaborator, choreographer, her own company. She's asked me to write the words for a full-length dance piece about Michael Milken, Junk Bond Roy. I'll get to Confab face-to-face, October 18th in NYC. Her synopsis keeps skittering off the pages into dance symbolic meaningfulness, but I watched her work in a video, and it's most inspiring. Never seen such fast-paced, aggressive legwork. The human bod turns into an astonishing implement. I hope to get to write a postmodern musical, Words, in which her dance troupe stars, plus 3 actor-singers to deliver my stuff. I don't know the person who'll set my lyrics. Pray he's as good and enjoyable to collaborate with as his true blue-worthy Stephen Taylor. I asked Bill Bramberger to edit a collected of my poetry, as is appropriate to someone of my years, if not poesy world clout, and we've been battling lists back and forth, badminton style. He's thought up a title, Routine Disruptions, which I like a lot. He's the one person in the world who thinks I'm a terrific writer, and he goes to the trouble and expense, resultant dollars down the drain, and publishes me. Every poet should have one such support system. One small press publisher once said at Naropa Gabfest a few years ago, or else they're kaput. He has a few small presses in mind to send my collected to, in the vain hope, and I do mean vain, but you never know. I've forbidden him to publish it himself. He needs a new car. Number 1 on his list is Alicia von Kornfleur of Mocha Mug. Coffee house press to you, homegirl. Deer mosey across my mown lawn, looking wistfully at the house, so close to its windows, trusting, high on a bumper crop of still crunch and tart apples, slow to dart off. They want to wear high heels, watch Jane Russell on cable, stomp out Bambi stereotyping, head for a mall, buy Ferragamo boots, the better to stomp their way to tropical sunsets, and anteaters slithering along the arroyo. Glad your students are a lift. Hope your autumn goes well and that breath comes and goes without causing you concern. NAW, New American Writing, was sent me by Maxine Chernoff, so I got to read your story last night. You and Paul Auster absolutely dazzle me. How you both know how to write pages that don't seem written, and yet are such a delight to read, like James Cain further back, or Barbara Pym, or Elizabeth Bishop as poet, is a puzzlement, one I relish. Sort of like singing so naturally the song doesn't seem sung. Keep in touch. I think of you often, and I'm glad you're there. Love from your callous chum, Kenward.
Boulder, Colorado, September 29th, 1995. Dear Kenward, your letter made me very happy. You sound so good. I read the paragraph about the deer in both of my classes. One student asked, "Is that a poem or a prose poem?" I said it was just part of a lovely letter, that it was simply an example of how a great artist sees the world. I'm glad you sent money to Ivan. In addition to feeling rotten, he was quite sick about moving and hospital bills. I haven't seen him to see the collage you made. I love the collage print you sent to me. I will write a proper letter soon. My ex-husband died. I was in Oakland for a week. It was sad and sweet. My sons are so fine and loving to me and one another. Buddy, was an immense presence in our lives. He had called me every day since I moved here. It wasn't until I got back that I felt his loss. Sweet thing about death is that all you're left with is tender memories and new ones that you had forgotten. Thanks for comparing me to James M. Cain and Elizabeth Bishop. When I was 7 or 8, I saw Mildred Pierce 5 times. Changed my name to Sherry. I loved it when Mildred Pierce answers the question, "What will you have to drink?" She says, "I'll take Sherry. Home." I love you. Lucia. Boulder, Colorado, December 26th, 1995. Dear Kenward, well, I got one of these mysterious poetry grants again. And again, pretty spooky. Not just because my car totally died this time, but I didn't even care about that. I had finally graded all the papers and read the dissertations, and only one 10-page letter to write supporting colleague for tenure. Thinking to myself, will I use this time to write? Have I forgotten? Do I still have anything to say? Just sitting around feeling museless. Last time I was so ashamed. Oh, I have done so little work, I don't deserve it, etc. This time I look upon it as a sign from above. The face in the tortilla. What was that song? I found my $1 million baby at the 5 and 10 cent store? I remember all the words to Paper Doll. Do you? It's pretty weird, actually.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?